Welcome to another episode of the Cypher Report, where we give you the information, tools, and analysis you need to decrypt the world. Today's episode is about future Secretary of State Marco Rubio. This is the first installment in our series exploring various members of Trump's upcoming cabinet. Each episode will dive deep into each member's background to understand how they'll lead their respective departments. To round out each episode, we will discuss how the left can strategically approach each cabinet member. Interested? Hit the bell to get notified when each episode airs. Let's go ahead and get into it. Marco Rubio is one of Trump's least controversial picks and one with real experience for the job, having served on the Foreign Relations Committee. During the 2016 Republican primary, he took Trump to task for being unfit for office, a blowhard, someone who didn't understand America's special place in the world. His worldview centers on America as a stabilizing global leader. In 2015, during his primary run, he wrote in Foreign Affairs the following: "America's status as the greatest and most influential nation on earth comes with certain inescapable realities. Among these are an abundance of enemies wishing to undermine us, numerous allies dependent on our strength and consistency, and the burden of knowing that every choice we make in exercising our power, even when we choose not to exercise it at all, has tremendous human and geopolitical consequences." Rubio's stance aligns with the post-World War II liberal global order, prioritizing America's role as a defender of stability and democracy, a neocon, if you will. This has put him at odds with the Fortress America wing of the MAGA movement, which is more isolationist, skeptical of a liberal world order, and desires a reduced global footprint. So why did Trump pick Rubio to be Secretary of State? In a word, loyalty. Rubio cultivated Trump's favor since 2017. He began by serving as Trump's unofficial advisor on Latin American issues and became one of his most important backers in the Senate. He, like the majority of the MAGA movement, is also a hawk on China and Iran, but most importantly, he agrees with them on border issues. Let's start with the border. Rubio's stance on immigration is particularly noteworthy. He was once a member of the bipartisan Gang of Eight, a group of senators who crafted a comprehensive immigration reform bill. The proposed legislation combined stricter border enforcement with pathways to citizenship for undocumented immigrants.
If we are able to reform and modernize our legal immigration system, if we can win the confidence of the American people back, we're left with the issue of millions of people that are still undocumented. And the great question then is, well, what do you do about them? And I've talked about what you do about the kids. What about everybody else? Here's the truth. If we're honest with ourselves, we don't know yet, because it's not easy. I know we're not going to round up and deport 12 million people. I know we're not going to grant amnesty to 12 million people. And somewhere between those two ideas is the solution.
To introduce an immigration reform legislation that ends to seek de facto amnesty by achieving both the strongest border security and enforcement measures in U.S. history, but also by modernizing our legal immigration system so that it can unleash the strong economic growth and job creation potential that immigration has.
While it passed the Senate, the bill died in the House due to strong opposition from conservatives who viewed it as too lenient.
It destroys the rule of law. And the rule of law is an essential pillar of American exceptionalism. Many people come here because we have equal justice under the law. If we reward people who break the law, they're unlikely to raise their children to respect it. The rule of law, at least with regard to immigration, it would be destroyed. And the promise that the law would be enforced from this point forward, I don't know how we can listen to that with a straight face.
The House preferred a piecemeal approach, with stricter border enforcement leading the way. People assume that Rubio's political life died with comprehensive immigration reform. The Tea Party, the precursor to Trump, was ascendant, even in the Senate. Large swaths of the GOP activist base saw Rubio's participation with the Gang of Eight as a betrayal. But Rubio is a political animal. Once the writing was on the wall, he pivoted hard and went from the bill's champion to one of its greatest detractors.
Well, if you became president, would you sign the bill that you put together into law?
Well, that's a hypothetical that will never happen. When I'm president, there will be no amnesty. I'll cancel Obama's unconstitutional executive orders, cut sanctuary city funding, and deport criminal aliens. We'll add 20,000 border agents, finish all 700 miles of border wall. And if we aren't 100% sure who you are and why you're coming to America, you're not getting in. I'm Marco Rubio. I approved this message. to keep America safe.
Clearly, Rubio has abandoned comprehensive immigration reform for a more draconian, border security first approach. He seems to believe that if done correctly, the government will regain the trust of conservatives who think it has failed at one of its most basic duties, border enforcement. What is not clear is if he or they would be willing to pursue humane and mercy-driven approach in dealing with the roughly 12 million undocumented people in the country currently. While Rubio has said that conservatives are compassionate people, the immigration hardliners who run the party appear to have no desire for compromise. In fact, Trump has promised to carry out the largest deportation program the world has ever seen. Democrats have no reason to believe this is merely bluster. After all, everyone who surrounds Trump has said the same thing.
In terms of the policy sets to accomplish this, as President Trump showed in his first term, it's a series of interlocking domestic and foreign policies to accomplish this goal. In no particular order, just to rattle off a few fast, you have your Safe Third agreements, you have Remain in Mexico, finish the wall, you have robust prosecutions of illegal aliens, you do interior repatriation flights to Mexico, not back to the north of Mexico. It's very important. You re-implement Title 42. You have several muscular 212Fs. That's the travel ban authority. We did a few of those in the Trump administration. You would bring those back and add new ones on top of that. You would establish large-scale staging grounds for removal flights. So you grab illegal immigrants and then you move them to the staging grounds, and that's what the planes are waiting for federal law enforcement to then move those illegals home. You deputize the National Guard to carry out immigration enforcement. And then you also deploy the military to the southern border, not just with a mission to observe, but with an impedance and denial mission. In other words, you reassert the fundamental constitutional principle that you don't have a right to enter into our sovereign territory, to even request the asylum claim. The military has the right to establish a fortress position on the border and to say no one can cross here at all. Yes.
Why should a child who is an American citizen have to pack up and move to a country that they don't know?
Because their parent obviously entered the country illegally, had a child knowing he was in the country illegally, so he created that crisis.
Highlighting the denaturalization project.
This week, Trump indicated in a Truth Social post he would declare a national emergency and utilize the U.S. military assets to carry out mass deportations of undocumented migrants.
And that whole remigration thing, that's talking about deporting legal immigrants and stripping citizenship from naturalized citizens, including natural-born citizens. Let's move on from the border and take a broader look at Latin America. Rubio played a key role in shaping Trump's Latin American foreign policy. So much so that he was once called Trump's Shadow Secretary of State back in 2019. But why was Rubio given this responsibility? For Trump, foreign policy ties back to domestic considerations. Trump believes that he won Florida in 2016 and 2024 due to his strong performance among Cuban and Venezuelan immigrants. Rubio, as a prominent Cuban-American Latino leader from Florida, positioned himself as the go-to representative for these communities, cementing his influence. This focus makes sense. Immigrants from across Latin America, Brazil, Venezuela, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Cuba have made Florida their home, each bringing their unique stories and concerns to the state's political landscape. But all these communities have strong ties to their country of origin, and at times, an anti-left bend in their worldview. Rubio is no different, especially with Cuba, and this is what reunited the two men after their acrimonious 2016 primary. Trump, for his part, has long had a desire to see the Castro regime fall. We can trace Trump's opinion on Cuba back to at least 1999, when during a campaign event, yes, Trump sort of ran in 2000, where he said,
"I've had a lot of offers, and sadly it's all been very recently, to go into Cuba on deals, business deals, real estate and other deals. And I've rejected them on the basis that I will go when Cuba's free." As you know, and the people in this room know better than anyone, putting money and investing money in Cuba right now doesn't go to the people of Cuba. It goes into the pockets of Fidel Castro. He's a murderer. He's a killer. He's a bad guy in every respect. And frankly, the embargo against Cuba must stand, if for no other reason than if it does stand, he will come down. He will tumble down, and it'll finally happen.
It's no surprise then that Trump made Cuba a focal point of his 2016 campaign, promising Cuban Americans to reinstate trade and travel embargo loosened under Obama. This is where Rubio's influence became apparent, marking his first significant role in shaping Trump's Latin American policies. On May 3rd of 2017, Rubio met with Trump, Rex Tillerson, and Mark John Kelly in the Oval Office to discuss Trump's plan to do away with Obama's executive orders in regard to Cuba. Rubio remembers saying the following: "What you've committed to do on Cuba, what you want to do on Cuba, is never going to come from career staff. It's going to have to come from the top down. You are going to have to tell them what to do." Trump took this advice to heart, quickly pivoting away from career civil servants to placing confidence in White House staff in charge of implementing the policy. The plan proved successful, and Rubio cemented his place in Trump's inner circle. Trump even directed National Security Council Western Hemisphere Division to, quote, "make Rubio happy." From here on out, Rubio had a great deal of influence with Latin American policy. In 2018, he was instrumental in getting the Nicaraguan Democracy and Human Rights Act passed. In 2019, he pushed the United States government to recognize Juan Guaido as the legitimate leader of Venezuela. After Bolsonaro's victory in Brazil, he said, quote, the following: "President Bolsonaro represents a new era in Brazilian politics that marks a dramatic departure from the leftist, anti-American governments of Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva and Dilma Rousseff. A strong, vibrant, and democratic Brazil that is more closely aligned with the United States as a strategic partner can be a force multiplier in addressing the ongoing crisis in Venezuela, where governance has deteriorated and there's widespread corruption, and in countering the malign intentions of authoritarian regimes like China, Russia, and Iran that intend to expand their presence and activities in Latin America." And Trump obliged each step of the way. He recognized Juan Guaido. He deepened his ties to Bolsonaro. He backed a plot to overthrow Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela and sanctioned the Nicaraguan government. Trump's "making Rubio happy" strategy seems to have paid off as he increased his voter share in 2020 and 2024 versus 2016. And Rubio went from being one of Trump's biggest detractors to being one of his staunchest allies. As I mentioned at the top of the show, Rubio's foreign policy has been very much in line with the neoconservative worldview. The United States' efforts at spreading democracy abroad and its military might are ultimately stabilizing forces for the world. And while America may make mistakes, like the Iraq War, ultimately the security umbrella we provide and interventions we do are better for the world than the alternative of warring states and anarchy. After all, if the United States pulls back, that will create a power vacuum that will be exploited by our enemies and make us worse off. Or at least so they claim. In the same foreign affairs article mentioned earlier in the show, Rubio said the following: "As the world has grown more interconnected, American leadership has grown more critical to maintaining global order and defending our people's interest, and as our economy has turned from a national to international, domestic policy and foreign policy have become inseparable." President Barack Obama has failed to recognize this. He entered office believing the United States was too engaged in too many places, and that globalization had diminished the need for American power. He set to work peeling back the protective cover of American influence, stranding our allies and deferring to the whims of nefarious regional powers. He has vacillated between leading recklessly and not leading at all, which has left the world more dangerous and America's interests less secure. In other words, maybe there's some truth to it, but this doesn't mean America should be the world's police. Since 9/11, America's military interventions in the world have been mostly negative. Most seem to agree that the 2003 invasion of Iraq was fucking stupid. But there are others. Rubio supported America's intervention in Libya, which turned it into a failed state, destabilized North Africa, and increased Europe's refugee crisis, which in turn increased right-wing appeal globally. I'm looking at you, Lawrence Southern. Nor should we view every rising power as an existential threat. Wait. MAGA doesn't agree with anything I just said. Sure, they talk a good game about ending the forever wars.
I'll tell you my own opinion on Marco Rubio. I think it would be a huge mistake for President Trump to choose him because he represents the neocon warmongering establishment.
Kamala Harris will get us to World War III.
It's a dangerous world. I mean,
Yes,
China,
it is.
Russia, Iran, North Korea, kind of a gathering storm in the modern.
But they are simply turning their bloodlust toward another.
Of combating terrorism. What do you think are the current greatest terror threats to the Western world? Well, thank you for having me. I'm a big fan of yours. We follow you closely here on the other side of the world. The resurgence of global jihadism. People think that it went away, but it didn't.
And the Islamist ideology, not the same as the religion of Islam, but this Islamist ideology, which is a political ideology that inspired the terrorist attacks on our country on 9/11, is the greatest threat that we're facing right now in this country and the world.
Yes, but we're at war with China. Ray Dalio he tweeted it the other day. We're at war with China.
What are your thoughts on China?
It's the greatest existential threat this country and the world faces.
Pete, honestly, that sounds to me like a declaration of war.
Well, I mean, the Iranian regime has been at war with the United States effectively since 1979.
That's true.
This is what unites neocons, Fortress America, and MAGA. They are skeptical of democracy and the liberal world order. Many are sympathetic towards Russia, if not outright allies. They are not anti-war, they are anti-helping Ukraine. They view liberals as weak, which is why they blame Biden for Ukraine and October 7th. They believe Iran is a threat and must be stopped, hence approving what Israel is doing in Palestine, Iran, and Lebanon. They are anti-Islam. They want to break from neocons in regards to regime change, but are okay with assassinations and drone strikes. They fear a rising China. They suffer from zero-sum thinking, the belief that if some group is doing well, we must be doing worse. Hence, MAGA's desire for more military spending and increased tariffs. A medley of contradictions, bravado, existential dread, and schoolyard bullying tactics. They are deeply afraid of World War III, but not of the actions that could bring us there, at least not when it comes to China. This is how Rubio fits into the new GOP. He is a China on Iran hawk.
In the case of Iran has, it seems to be more specifically focused on Donald Trump. I mean, it's been now publicly documented they're trying to kill him. And so if Iran's trying to kill Donald Trump, they most certainly don't want him to win the election. Well, Iran's goal it has always been the same, and that is to make Israel an unlivable place. What makes TikTok so good is that it has this artificial intelligence that knows you better than you know yourself. It's literally reading your mind. The more you use it, the more it knows about you. The problem is not that TikTok has that. The problem is that ByteDance and their engineers in China are the ones that own that artificial intelligence.
He has softened on Ukraine by voting against more aid and saying that we have to negotiate with Russia to end the war. He wants the United States to throw its weight around more to prevent other countries from doing so. He is pro-military spending and buildup. All these things are perfectly in line with the new GOP, and why you won't see much pushback, if any, from MAGA when going forward. One thing that liberals have gotten wrong about Trump, and I'm guilty of this myself to a degree, is the idea that Trump is deeply isolationist. MAGA is many things. They are anti-globalism. Many are against free trade internationally. They believe the United States has been taken advantage of by enemies and allies alike. They tend to be skeptical of liberal democracy, and they think nation building is a fool's errand. But most of the MAGA coalition doesn't want the United States to be an island. They don't want America to become paradise from Attack on Titan. They want what Trump said at the World Economic Forum at Davos in 2018.
As president of the United States, I will always put America first, just like the leaders of other countries should put their country first also. But America first does not mean America alone.
In a sense, MAGA wants to return to an era where the United States' interests were simpler, where carrying a big stick was all America needed to be safe. They want to return to a world where trade was done between 2, maybe 3 countries at a time, not dozens. They want to disentangle the United States from the rest of the West. They want to get rid of the post-World War II global era. They want to get rid of America's global liberal world order and to reestablish a new world order. Rubio serves as a bridge between the old and the new. He has successfully triangulated a new American first foreign policy, where the United States increasingly relies on partners like Israel to do our dirty work that the CIA used to do abroad, while still advocating for the United States to destabilize unfriendly governments in Latin America. He, like Trump, views Latin America as our sphere of influence.
It has been the formal policy of our country since President Monroe that we reject the interference of foreign nations in this hemisphere and in our own affairs.
And so I do not pretend to have the, all-knowing strategy on how to pursue the Western Hemisphere, but I do know that we have ideas that we intend to share with the new administration
with the people who work in this building, and with my colleagues in the United States Senate, and with each of you here today. And so while these are not necessarily universally accepted concepts of a strategy, I think they lay the groundwork for a way forward that I don't believe is either partisan, nor in many cases should be controversial. Let's begin by constructing the three pillars of what I hope our engagement in the region will be built on. The first is obviously our safety, security, our national security. The second is expanding economic prosperity. And the third is defending our values.
By understanding how much prominence anti-left sentiment and the Monroe Doctrine have within MAGA, and with Rubio specifically, we can predict how the next Trump administration will act in terms of foreign policy. First, we can expect the United States to increase pressure on Venezuela. Venezuela has been a thorn in the side of the right wing of the United States ever since Cesar Chavez nationalized the oil industry and pushed ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips out of the country in 2007. Messing with daddy's access to oil is always going to get you smacked, and Trump isn't any different here. Not only that, but a growing number of Trump supporters view transnational gangs as arms of the state. Rubio is no different here either.
We begin with Venezuela, where the Maduro regime has completely undermined that country's democratic constitution. It's imprisoned and tortured its opposition members, it's killed protesters with impunity, it's destroyed the nation's economy. One of the richest countries in the region, one of the richest countries in the world in terms of resources. Venezuela is an oil state that's also rich in farmland, by the way, yet it's corrupt and dictatorial government is running out of money and can't afford to feed its own people. As that nation continues to melt down, the regime's growing transnational criminal networks are getting exposed. We see the Maduro government is not just a dictatorship, it's also a criminal enterprise.
In the same vein, we can expect Trump and Rubio to continue to look for anti-left governments to work within Latin America to counter rising Chinese influence in the region. For this reason, we can expect Trump and Rubio to be more friendly with the Bolsonaro government in Brazil than Lula's government, especially since Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South America, BRICS, seek to create a currency to circumvent trade and financial sanctions imposed by the United States. And this is funny if you think about it, because the Bretton Woods Agreement that made the US dollar the trade currency of the world is part of the American post-World War II order that MAGA seeks to overturn. We can expect Rubio to try to steer the Trump administration towards at least bilateral agreements with other countries in the South China Sea and continue to work with Taiwan to counter China as well.
And the South China Sea in particular, I believe, the last time I checked, is a place where a significant percentage of global commerce is now transiting through. So this matters in real time to people in this country. In essence, I guarantee you there are things in this room right now that came to this country as it transited through the South China Sea and vice versa for our exports. So this is incredibly important. And what China's basically challenging is that world order.
After all of MAGA sees China as a threat.
And where everybody else, oh, these people are terrible, we are looking at a more murderous dictatorship than the Nazis at the top of their game.
Next, we can expect Trump and Rubio to have beef with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum. We already see this bubbling with Trump's threats of a trade war with Mexico and how she responded to Trump's caravan statements. For his part, Rubio has taken a softer tone with Mexico in the past, seeing them as natural partners. But with an increasingly left-leaning government and Trump, we will probably see a tougher stance on Mexico as well, coming from Rubio. Finally, and probably most importantly, we can expect the United States to take a more active role in coordinating with right-leaning governments in Central and South America to take on criminal elements. Well, maybe not a more active role. For decades, the United States has worked with the Mexican government and others to do anti-drug operations in Central America. Some covert, some overt. What is new, though, at least in the last 20 years, is an open call to go to war with the cartels. Some even going as far to say that we should invade Mexico itself.
Look, my position is very clear. I believe we should have a military presence, at the very least, on the southern border, if not across the border. You know, one of the things we learned post-Trump presidency is that he had ordered a bombing of a couple of fentanyl labs, crystal meth labs in Mexico, just across the border, and for whatever reason the military didn't do it. I think that was a mistake.
Furthermore, I will order the Department of Defense to make appropriate use of special forces, cyber warfare, and other overt and covert actions to inflict maximum damage on cartel leadership.
Taken together, this is very much a return to the Monroe Doctrine, and Rubio will play an important role in bringing it back. Now on to the fun part, Large elements of the broad coalition that make up the left will not want to work with Trump on anything. There will be a desire to return to resistance on all fronts. But if we want to win elections, we will need to find reasonable areas of agreement to make our disagreements more powerful. Liberals and the left do not get the privilege of being the party that says no, because our coalition believes in the government's ability to effect positive change in people's lives. We'll have to figure out how to thread the needle on multiple issues to maintain our morality while also appealing to voters. While Rubio has morphed into a more MAGA-compliant politician, there are things I believe we can work with him on, and in doing so, perhaps steer him away from more extreme policies that we cannot. First, I believe that the left have no love affair for narco-terrorists. Shocker, I know. Rubio's not wrong about how destabilizing cartels have been for Latin America, and how governments that are trying to maintain some semblance of order have to sometimes work with them to keep peace. While Rubio is correct on the issue, the Monroe Doctrine and Cold War era politics are part of the reason why cartels were able to flourish in the first place. We shouldn't return to either. Doing so would be counterproductive, cause blowback, and further destabilize the region. Instead, we should look for better ways to partner with countries to tackle the cartels. Now, I know what many on our left are going to say. Just legalize drugs and the cartels will go away. I agree that more drugs should be legalized, but I do not believe it'll cause the cartels to collapse. The cartels have become de facto governments. They do more than just drug trafficking. They are a vast criminal enterprise that dabble in all illicit activity. They provide service and economic opportunities to large swaths of the population in these countries. While legalized drugs will put a dent in their revenue streams, they will still be able to undercut or even take over legal markets through illegal means, including murder. The cartels need to be rooted out. But like with all other criminal enterprises, the uprooting cannot come from the outside. And because the issue exists in multiple areas, it cannot be done in one country at a time. Otherwise, you end up just playing a giant game of whack-a-mole. ISIS was successfully defeated because local partners dealt with them while providing civil services and economic investments. And we should take the same approach when dealing with the cartels. Therefore, the left should push Rubio and Trump to build a coalition of Latin American states to deal with this problem, rather than relying on the might of the US military. Furthermore, the cartels have such high influence because they often provide the only economic opportunity in their strongholds. We should push the Trump administration to do similar things that Biden administration did here, increasing investments in these local areas and building community organizations that can withstand cartel influence. For example, the United States should financially backstop programs that seek to move farmers away from growing coca plants while helping to provide security guarantees for those who participate in the program. Security has to be an all of the above approach, and I believe that Rubio is amenable to these sorts of programs. Second, I believe the left is full of compassionate people who want to see immigration reform happen in our lifetimes, and the sooner the better. We aren't getting any younger here. Trump does not have any appetite for comprehensive immigration reform that allows more people to enter the United States legally. During his first term, he cut every legal pathway to come to the United States by outright implementing smaller quotas, the so-called Muslim ban, and slow walking all applications. But Rubio is not Trump here, even if he has drifted further to the right. The left should hammer on the point that Trump's desire to use military to take on the cartels will further destabilize the region. There is no question that this will increase the flow of refugees and asylum seekers to the United States, since migration spikes happen when countries fall into failed state status. MAGA will inevitably say, that's not our problem, but they are wrong, and Rubio will know it. As such, the left should bring this up every time the Trump administration talks about striking a cartel with a missile, seeks to overthrow a government, or sanction a country into the ground for not playing ball with the United States. We should push Rubio to use his power as Secretary of State and influence with Trump to open up legal pathways to enter the country, from increasing the number of people who can come to the United States under visa programs or refugee status. We should pressure Rubio to not remove temporary protected status from Haitian migrants. We should appeal to his compassionate conservative nature to thwart some of Trump's darker impulses. He will be confirmed by the Senate. We need him to be one of the smart people in the room. As far as how we should approach Rubio's China question, I honestly don't know. There are real national security concerns with China. These concerns aren't made up fear-mongering bullshit by neocons looking for a new enemy. They are valid. Hell, I did a whole hour-and-a-half episode about TikTok and its problems. I still use it though. But I do not agree with Neo-Con approach to dealing with China. I don't think we should seek to create artificial democratic movements to counter Chinese influence in the region. I do believe that deepening trade deals with allies would be good. With all that said, it is hard to know just where exactly Rubio would lead the State Department in dealing with China. MAGA seems to be comfortable with China maintaining a sphere of influence in the region. Rubio less so. We know that he's a China hawk, so much so that he was sanctioned by China in 2020 for his outspokenness against their very real human rights abuses. I suppose then the best approach for the left is to tamp down on saber rattling that may come from the administration while pointing to the need to have diplomatic dialogue to address these concerns. What we don't want is to completely break ties with China. We don't want to escalate tensions and accidentally trigger a war. We should want China to be a peacemaker. We should want China to address its human rights issues. We should want their help in dealing with the Ukraine war. Whatever the left chooses to do on this front, it should be well within these parameters. Lastly, I think the left should stand firm in its opposition to any State Department-led deal that could give Trump cover for his horrid deportation strategy. We have not been invaded, no matter how much Rubio and Trump say that we have. We are not dealing with 30 million illegal immigrants in this country. This number is often touted by the right, but it is made up bullshit. Rubio is likely to try to make deals with Central and South American countries to take back the masses of deported people. He's likely to buy countries off. We shouldn't stand for this. Securing the border doesn't require inhumane practices. There isn't any way to thread this needle, folks, and we shouldn't try. If we are successful in playing the game of the give and take here, if we can articulate the real problems that exist, but there are better ways to deal with them, we will not only appeal to our base, but also a broader coalition that is capable of winning elections. That should be our goal. Thank you for watching and making it to the end of the video. Please be sure to share, like, and subscribe. Drop a comment to tell me what you thought I got right or wrong. We like hearing from everybody. And by popular demand, our next video will be on the brainworm that is RFK. So there is that. I'll be sure to let you all know when that's done. Until next time, this is Cypher, signing off.